My father came to Scotland in early 50s. In fact, it was in 1952. He had come to Scotland on his journey to Germany to do a course on motorbikes. They seemingly had acquired a license for those. By the time he got to Scotland in Glasgow, he was advised by his family back home that the contract had been withdrawn, so he doesn't need to go to Germany. He can simply just come back to Pakistan. But my father said, this is a nice place to stay. I think I'll stay on for a short period of time. So he stayed on for a short period of time, and during that time, he made some friends, and they introduced them to my mother, and my father then simply married here. He was due to marry somebody back home. He was advised by his elders not to marry where he would have married normally. And the fact that he married here, he decided that once I was born and I was a few months old, to send my mother and me back as evidence that he had married and settled in the UK. So he had no intentions of going back. So he'd never asked me whether he would come here or not. I just simply arrived. Right? My name is Hanzala Malik. It's an Arabic name. My father gave me this name, and I'm very proud of my name. It's a very rare name. I went to Pakistan when I was approximately 4, and I remember making my first speech on the train when I was eventually told that I've arrived in Pakistan, because we went by road and I kept asking, is this Pakistan, is this Pakistan? And eventually my mother said to me at long last, yes, we have arrived in Pakistan. So I stood up on the train seat and I said, you are all welcome to come to my home because I am now in Pakistan. Yes, my first job was, I was 7 years of age in Pakistan. An event was that my mother was going to have a birthday and I didn't have anything to give her. And I said to myself, I need to find a way of getting a present for my mother. And I had a few annas with me, and I said, right. So I went into the bazaar to see what I could purchase with this. And as I strolled down the bazaar, I stopped outside a wholesaler who sold cigarettes, tobacco, and matches, etc. And I knew somebody from our village there. He was buying something from them. So I just went over to greet him. And he said to me, what are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm just out to buy a present for my mother. And I noticed he was buying matches. And he was buying matches. You were getting 12 packs of matches in one box for 8 annas. And I said, so that means if I sell a pack of matches for 1 anna, I'll make a profit. So I took a gamble and I bought a pack. And I went to one of my auntie's houses and I said, Auntie, do you want to buy matches? And she says, why are you selling matches? I says, well, Mum's birthday is coming up, so I want to collect some money. She says, right, okay, how much are this? I told her. She says, well, you're not really making any profit. She had realized I'd bought them from a wholesaler. I says, well, whatever the price, that's my price. So she gave me a rupee rather than 12 annas, so I made even a greater profit. So I repeated that several homes and I actually made a profit. And that helped me buy a half-decent present for my mother. And my mother visited one of our friends a few days later and she says, did you have a good birthday? My mom said, yes. How do you know about my birthday? Oh, your son was selling matches. She says, he was doing what? So when she came home, she challenged me. She said, what were you doing selling matches? Where did you get the matches? So I had to tell her the whole story. And I got a huge hug and a kiss for that. So, you know, that was even more profit. So I enjoyed it. So that was my very, very first business venture. So I'll never forget that. It was good. Well, when I came back in Scotland, I was approaching the age of 11. I went to Annette Street Primary School for a period, and then we moved to the West End, and I went to North Kelvinside Secondary School. And during my period at school, my first job, proper job, was a paper delivery job. So I delivered papers, newspapers, and thereafter I left education to the disappointment of my parents, particularly my father, who was very keen to see me progress in education, because he was an orphan at the age of 2 and he never really got an education. So he was very, very enthusiastic about us getting a good education. And when I disappointed in that, he said to me, you know, with your education, you won't even make a bus conductor. And just to prove him wrong, I went and joined a bus company for 2 months to become a bus conductor, to say, well, I can become a bus conductor. I organized the first youth movement in the West End for the Muslim community who had nothing, because I had spent some time in the Boys Brigade and I learned a great deal from that in terms of engaging with people. And I felt that there should be something for the young from within the minority communities. So we started a youth movement in the West End. I had huge battles to fight from our elders in the community who didn't want to give us room and who thought we were abusing the building by playing games there and so on. But we said we need to get people off the streets. So there was one particular incident I remember going to a conference. It was the UK Islamic Mission conference in Rochdale. And they were all making speeches and I was sitting in the front row yawning. And somebody says to me, "Why are you yawning?" I says, "Because they're talking stuff that doesn't really affect me. They're talking about people back home in Pakistan. I don't live in Pakistan, I live here. And nobody's addressing the issues in this country." And he says, "How do you mean?" I says, "Well, I'm a young individual. There's nothing in the conference that addresses my needs. Who am I? Where am I from? Where am I going? What are my beliefs? What should be my beliefs? Nobody's addressed that. You're all talking about political parties back home and how you had good times and how you should be practicing your faith." So he said, "Well, so what do you want to do?" I says, "Well, give me a chance to tell people what we want." He says, "You want to make a speech?" I says, "Oh, I'll make a speech." So they invited me up to the stage and I made a speech, and I think I horrified a lot of them, because one of the things I said to them was, one, they were not addressing our needs, the youth needs in this country. Two, which was even more important, was they weren't addressing the needs of our women and our young girls. And they were petrified about, girls coming to the mosque or coming to our learning center. And they were afraid of anything going wrong, the publicity they would get. And, they just couldn't handle it. They weren't prepared to take the risk. And I said, while you people are not taking the risk, our kids are not benefiting from the facilities that you have. Well, what we did was we managed to acquire a room from the UK Islamic Mission following that conference, because before that we had discussed the issue on a number of occasions, but unfortunately we were facing a stone wall, as one would say. However, after that conference and that statement I made, the president of the UK Islamic Mission had given me a personal guarantee that they would assist in this process. So we got a room from them, and getting the room, what we did was set about setting up standing orders for donations from the community to help us build that youth center. We bought equipment, we did outings, we did a lot of stuff. In fact, we did so much, we actually used to on occasion pay the mosque's bills, because we were so professional and so successful at what we were trying to do. And then the central organization, the UK Islamic Mission, said, "This was a good pilot project, why don't we roll it out nationally?" And that then created the first youth organization UK-wide called the Islamic Youth Movement UK, which I was a founder member of as well. And that, I think, changed a lot of perceptions, particularly amongst the elders, who for the first time realized that engaging with the young is not a bad thing, it's a good thing, because they had so much good to offer. There was no negativity. The young in this country didn't have any baggage from back home. And the Muslim community is not only from one country, they're from many countries. And even Pakistan itself is a large country in its own right, and it has so much diversity in it that it became very clear very, very quickly that there was a lot of positivity amongst our young that we can harness, which will obviously help us build a stronger community in the future. Yes, that was a strange journey. I used to work for a company called Azad Videos, and I worked very long hours, but despite that, I was always helping the community, just simple things by helping fill up passport application forms, to housing benefits, to housing applications, to whatever people needed doing, we were there for them. And Maria Fife, ex-MP for Mary Hill, saw that I did a lot of work in the community, and she had suggested to my father that perhaps I should be considered for councillor because I would be more effective. And my father came from Pakistan, from a family that was also already involved in politics, and he quite liked the idea. However, the unfortunate thing was that I didn't like the idea. I I thought I had no time and I didn't really want to do politics. And I said, listen, I do enough for the community as it is. I've never got any time. However, they made me a member of the Labour Party to start off with. And then one day they invited me to a meeting which I reluctantly attended, at which they made me a treasurer. And I didn't want to become a treasurer. I said, oh, it's only temporary till we get somebody else. And Muggins was a treasurer for 3 years. And then eventually my father decided he was going to put my name forward to be a councillor. So he put my name forward. I was called for an interview. I had no idea what a councillor does. So I said to my dad, I'm going to this interview. They're going to ask me questions about what a councillor does, and I don't know what councillors do. He says, well, they clean streets and they look after schools and they do the lighting and they do the roads, and that's all you really need to know. So when I went for my interview, and there was 3 people taking my interview, and they asked me, what does the council do? And I just repeated those 4 items that I was told what the council does. And I wasn't sure of other things, and I said, if I say the wrong thing, they'll say I don't know anything about it. I said, but I'm sure I'll learn on the job. And they all just smiled at me, said, yeah, I'm sure you will, and that's fine, we'll let you know how you got on. And they actually selected me. I think Scotland has a very important role to play in the world. The Scottish badge is something that I, for one, am very proud of. We have a history, we are a nation of inventors. We have people all over the world. I don't think there's any part of the world that I've been to where I've not met Scots. And I think as the Scottish Parliament develops, our links will also develop, because up until recently we've not really had a strategic overseas policy in Scotland. This Parliament hopefully will bring that about. That will absolutely change people's perceptions about Scotland. When you go overseas in some parts of the world and talk about Scotland, they say, yeah, that's a sort of city in England, isn't it? And you say, no, it's actually a country in its own right. We have our own stamps, we have our own currency, we have our own law and legislation, we have a lot of things of our own. Of course, most of them remember whiskey, but I tend to talk about the shortbread and the other good things we have, like haggis and the hunting that we do with the haggis. No, I think Scotland is now going to go places. I can feel the energy.